Kshama, I wanted to ask you what it means to you to be a disciple. I know that you're a disciple of Yogananda, and what does that mean to you? It means one thing to me, but it's very individualized. Tell me what it means to you.
Let me sit with that for a moment.
You may sit with that for a moment.
Yeah. I think for me, I feel for me, that it's the experience of walking through the world, through this life with a constant companion, with a friend and a guide and a hand to hold. And the more that I remember to draw on that relationship, to have a friend that never abandons, never is unavailable, is always ready to support and hold and nurture you through all of the experiences of life. I think to me that is the place that I rest in when I think about Yogananda and our line of gurus and the relationship there. It makes me think of when I first started coming onto the path, and I went to India. That was one of my first experiences, returning to Ananda after having grown up in the community, but not embracing this path fully as mine. I needed to wait, I think, until I had some of the other experiences of life before I could choose to return to Master, to this path of my own accord. And being in India, I started writing letters home to my family, emails home, sharing about what I was experiencing. And I started talking about energy and feeling the presence of our guides, our gurus. And family sort of chided me a little bit because I'd grown up with this vocabulary my whole life, but I'd never really spoken about it or felt it. And that experience started to awaken a living awareness of closeness with Master especially, but with many of our gurus.
So, of course, in as much as you're part of this millennial series, whether you technically qualify or not, I'm not certain, but Master died in 1952. So your experience with him is entirely without ever knowing him in the body, obviously, correct?
In this life, at least, yeah.
How much do you think other lives play into it? I mean, the way you put that, do you feel like you knew him without knowing him? Or?
Maybe. I mean, yes, I don't. With the intellectual mind, I don't know. My mom tells a story of the first time we visited Ananda Village, and I was maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, and we walked into the temple at the Expanding Light, and it's still hanging there. The huge picture of the last smile of Yogananda they'd taken it off the wall. Something was happening, but it was on the ground, so it was at floor level. And she says that I saw it, and I took off running across the room saying, na, 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 na. And so, I mean, that little touch tells me that there was something that awoke in me in that moment.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. So finish what you're saying, yeah.
How much that relationship was something I was consciously aware of growing up, I don't know. Maybe more or less at different points, but yeah, I think there's been a connection, right? I hope so.
Well, the fact that you live your life, I mean, what you said, I don't think you have to doubt that there is. I was just more actually wanting to hear how it feels to you, because every relationship is unique. It's a romance, so it's very personal.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I'm struggling for words, I think, in the moment. I've heard many people talk about this, but I can also speak from experience. I have a favorite picture of Yogananda, and I don't know what its name is, but it's the one where he's looking directly into the camera and his hair's a little a little wild, and his eyes are really intense. And I have it sitting here right next to me, actually, and I can feel him engaging with me. And like many people, I can feel different qualities coming through the image at different times. And my experience of it is guidance about what I need. And so sometimes I feel like he's sitting there chuckling at me or with me. And other times it's more of a stern, guiding force. But it to me, it feels very much like a friendship of someone who is utterly and completely forgiving and accepting and loving. The image of, I think her name was Shefali, the niece of Yogananda, when he visited India in the 30s, and he was going to the movies one night, and she just wouldn't be parted from him. She was a little child, and so he tucked her inside of his coat, and she just went, bear hugging the guru into this movie and sat on his chest through the whole show. To me, that's an image that is very much alive in how I feel and relate to Master.
You're describing the relationship of the word would be chela, which means child of the guru, as much as anything. Mm-hmm. But that relationship of being the child of the guru, it doesn't make you childish, does it? I mean, do you understand what I mean? Some people would think to be the child of the guru would be to disempower you. So
I think that's one of the learnings that I'm walking in this incarnation, is how to stand with the, hand in hand with the guru, and also feel the full force of that power pouring through me, through this body, and not feeling a separation or a distinction between the two. So I feel like it's a journey, and one that I'm very engaged in walking.
What are the, I mean, I don't want to, I'm not asking you to betray privacy in a way that you wouldn't want to, but what would you say, what holds you back? I mean, what does that power feel like? When does it come through? How does it feel when it comes? Are you at home?
For me, I feel most alive and in tune with and powered by a divine flow, a flow of grace when I'm in service. And I've personally have found, I think everyone finds their area where they resonate very strongly. And we talked last week about our educational approach. And I feel very alive and in tune when serving, particularly in that way, although in other ways also. But it's also, it's a journey to learn to trust, for me, in the power and truth and rightness of what it is that we're bringing and helping to manifest. Mm-hmm. So I think finding or listening to the inner guidance that helps me to know where and how to serve, and recognizing, I think for a long time I felt like I should be able to just turn it on and be able to serve in whatever capacity was being asked. And I certainly try to rise to that. But I also can feel there are natural ways that I can serve more, and that feel like when I'm engaged in that, an energetic flow opens up. And it's almost like being carried by a current, as opposed to trying to make something happen.
Right. Swamiji talked about when he first became a disciple and they put him on a building site, and just how terrible he was at striking nails and so on, and how willing he was, but really how terrible he was and then Master took him and had him start speaking and writing and answering letters. And then all of a sudden the flow was there.
Mm.
So it's completely so that we're born for certain things, and we don't always get to do the easiest. It's not necessarily, actually, to do the thing that's natural to you is not necessarily easier. I mean, would you put it that way?
I don't feel that it's easier, but I can feel when it's right. Or when it's, or when I've simply been able to open up enough to just let the divine flow through. And that's not to say that I can't learn to do that in a lot of other areas of life and service, but it's helpful for me to know what that feels like, so that I can also see and work with when I'm blocked.
Yes, I completely understand. The first thing I learned to do from intuition was to cook myself. And I thinking back through, Swami essentially taught me to cook in a weekend by awakening some innate understanding that I didn't know was there. But the reason I was able to do it was because it had absolutely no value to me. I was an intellectual person, and cooking was just, it meant nothing to me. I wasn't particularly interested. I was interested in food from a fanatic's point of view, but not from whether it tasted good or anything like that. So I had no blocks against learning how to cook. So I was just able to just get into this. And it was the first time I understood the difference between doing things mentally and doing it intuitively. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I play around with, and I know that there are many little trivial things that I do in life. And I think I've heard Tandava and other people talk about doing this. I'm sure it's a practice many of us play with, but the practice of trying to develop or allowing intuition to develop with very mundane, trivial, unimportant things, just asking, should I do this or should I do that? And I've noticed that if I pay attention, the response becomes clearer and stronger the more I pay attention to it. And the less I pay attention, or the more I hear it but I don't follow the instruction, the quieter that little voice becomes.
Oh, yes, there it is, isn't it? Well, intuition in a very real sense is like a muscle. It has to be exercised.
Yeah.
Very, very good. What part does the spiritual family play in your relationship to Master, if you could think of it like that? Like the people that you know, the people that you met. When you came to Ananda, was it for the people who were here, or for Master, for the whole of it? How would you think about it?
Do you mean when I came as an adult?
Yeah, as an adult.
Yeah.
Of course, being born into it, your mother and father were there. Yeah.
It's actually taken me a number of years. So when I moved to Palo Alto, which was my re-entry point back into living in community and really embracing this path, I was very much immersed in the school, and actually for quite a while my life was split. So I was working on weekends in Sacramento, and then spending the week down here interning and teaching and training and stuff. So it was a big dichotomy in terms of what I was experiencing. And then when the weekend travel fell away and I was able to be here more, there was so much support and so much love from our Guru Bhais and our community here. And I think the learning for me in that was a tremendous freedom I think prior to, my relationship with friends was based on age and similar life experience and maybe similar preferences and things. And then reawakening to being in community, you can have friends and Guru Bhais and have nothing in common except for a commitment to this life and to this path. But it was really a number of years ago when the energy worldwide in Ananda started to really coalesce with our tribe, as you call us,
Uh-huh.
that I had the experience of awakening to not only the fellowship of Guru Bhais, but also, oh, there are my people. Hello. And that connection, I don't know, maybe it's similar to what you talk about in terms of your tribe and the people that came to Ananda and the resonance that you feel with them and the shared mission. Maybe it was recognition of that, but there has been a deepening of heart connection
Mm-hmm.
with our young people.
How, let me just think about that for a second. When you said you can be friends with people that you have nothing in common with, that sounds so funny to, I mean, I know exactly what you mean, but can you express what that would actually mean?
Um, there are shared experiences in our community life, and whether it's sharing meals at Master's Kitchen or joining choir or coming together at Sunday services or gardening or participating in classes, those are unifying activities also. But then to experience all of us together with the diversity of life experiences and I don't know how to explain it other than there's a love, a sweetness, a care for so many souls that under any other circumstance our lives just wouldn't flow together in the same way.
Yeah.
Does that
No,
maybe you can clarify it?
No, that's it's very interesting to hear it because I myself have experienced it too. Of course, I I put it. This is going to really sound strange. Some of my best friends I don't particularly like. Now I know a lot of people are going to be seeing this who know me and wonder if they fall into that category. But so I have to explain it a little bit better. What I mean is sort of what you're saying, which is our personalities are very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And just as you said, we wouldn't just find ourselves, but we do really like each other because the personality is so superficial.
Yeah. And we enrich each other's lives so tremendously because we're so different and diverse.
Because we're so different. Yeah. And so you just and then oddly enough, you do find that you have a lot in common, even though you didn't think you had a lot, because personality is so thin and spirit is so enormous.
Yeah, that's it.
And so you just go right through personality, which is where many relationships in the world are entirely based on personality. We like the same sports team. We go skiing together. We like to drink. We like to play softball. We like to go shopping. We like to go to lunch. And all those things are just fine. But, and then for many people but there's the spirit is something. And with some of those people that you would die for, would give your life for, you also have a personality affinity, which is something else. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
You had said earlier that you traveled a lot and sort of seen Ananda and other places when you've had your tribal gatherings. Just speak a little bit about what you mean by your tribal gatherings.
So an inspiration started a few years ago, I guess about 4 years ago now. Narayani and Shurjo and others initiated a global gathering of some young people. It's interesting, age really is irrelevant, and yet at the same time, I think this awareness that we have come in batches in some sense to do some kind of work is also important to recognize. And so we could be many different ages or come from different life experiences, but there is something a lot of us sort of found Ananda around a similar time and have started stepping into more and more engagement. And so we've been gathering for about 4 years at different times, not every year, but 4 next wave gatherings, if you will, and spending time in different centers, Assisi, here in Palo Alto, Ananda Laurelwood and Portland Community, other places also. And going to those places, for me and for many of us, we begin to feel how differently life manifests, and yet at the same time, at the heart of it, Ananda has a vibrational quality that makes all of the superficial details irrelevant, and you just feel like you've come home again. And I, growing up, I had this experience going and living in different communities. And then when I was in college, or right out of college, I went to Europe and traveled quite a bit. And I hadn't stepped back onto the path at that point, but I had a situation where all of my plans went awry and I was semi-stranded in Spain. And through the Ananda Network, my family put the call out, our daughter needs help. And so I ended up in Elche, which is has a special place in the Ananda lineage also. But I ended up in a devotee's home in Elche to stay for a few days. And I woke up the first morning that I was there, and she was playing, I think it was Door of My Heart. I'm not entirely sure. But she was playing the harmonium in the basement meditation room. And I woke up to the sound drifting through the house. And something just rang so true of the quality of home. It just hit a spark. And I've experienced that in so many different communities that are Ananda centers throughout the world. It doesn't really matter what else is happening or what language you're singing in or speaking in. It's the same.
Isn't that beautiful? You know, so when in 1986, 87, when after 16 years at Ananda Village, 15 years at Ananda Village, Swamiji had me move down because it's south, to Palo Alto. And, work started here, and there was already an ashram. There was a small, not small even, it was a significantly established entity. And then over the course of time, it grew, got bigger, more people involved, eventually residential community and so on. And it was very interesting for me because that was just the beginning of Ananda. We never had to say Ananda Village prior to that because Ananda was Ananda Village. And gradually there began to be multiple Anandas, and we had to learn to say Ananda Village instead of just Ananda. And there was and is a quality of friendship and a vibrational quality to the air, some like a taste to the oxygen, I don't know how else to put it, in the Ananda atmosphere that I had only known at Ananda Village because that was where it was. It's very interesting for me to watch over the years here as this developed, watching it exactly replicate in completely different outer circumstances. And there was a kind of, it's a lot of the things we're talking about. It felt like home. There was an affinity of spirit that wasn't based on obvious external qualities. There was a feeling of being able to rely on these people, a feeling of Master's presence. Swami himself commented on it at a certain point that the feeling of Master's presence everywhere he went, that was an Ananda place, confirmed for him even that what he was doing was correct, that it was blessed by Master because you could feel Master's presence there. What an unusual, it's so unusual. Do you ever marvel that you've ended up here?
Frequently. Yeah, of course.
I mean, how do you think about it? Can you look back and see the consistent thread in your life, quite apart from being born into it?
I've never thought about it like that. I've always felt a certain connection to God. When I was small, I shared with you the story of my mom shares of my response to seeing a picture of Yogananda. And mean, the fact that the autobiography came to my parents when I was, about to be born and things like that. I mean, I feel like there's been a lot of shepherding of my life, for which I'm deeply grateful. But as a young child, I felt a deep, deep, deep connection with Jesus. And then growing up, I feel like that evolved into more spirit through nature for quite a lot of years. And then really, I guess out of high school, more in college, I started feeling I didn't relate directly to Master during those years, but I drew on Ganesha. And he was my buddy and my companion all through college. Walking across the campus late at night and having little inklings of fear, I would start chanting Ganesha Sharanam all the way until I got in my car and the door was locked. Same thing, other moments of anxiety or fear or worry, especially on the physical plane. Ganesha was always who I went back to. And then a number of years later, when I started wanting more, and the awakening of, I should go to India, and I want discipleship. This is what I'm coming home to. I feel like there's always been a connection point, but I can't say I'm not one who remembers looking at Master every day as a child and growing up and saying, "You are mine." I hope he was watching over me. I think he was, but it wasn't a clear thread that I was conscious of, although I'm sure it's there.
Well, actually, you answered my question thinking I'd asked you a different one. The question I asked was, what was the consistent thread? And the consistent thread was God. When you say as a child you were very devoted to Jesus, I was not at all religious. I didn't know anything about God. God, it wasn't that I disbelieved in God. Well, of course I was Jewish, so I certainly wasn't going to be devoted to Jesus, but it's just like religion, God, spirituality. If you'd asked me, I remember the only time I ever even remember addressing the question was this sort of vague sense that we were all connected. But I can even remember at the time thinking, that is a really lame answer to a really important question.
I sometimes, I feel like I don't know, I feel like I grew up immersed in the awareness that we are part of all that is, and that there are certain things that when we talk about them intellectually, I kind of step back and think, why are we talking about this? Is it not apparent, or do we not all feel it awaken us in that way? And growing up at the village, having parents that cultivated, having a community that cultivated that, having that be my awareness constantly, or my frame of reference constantly. What a gift to grow up with yogis.
Fantastic. I think that has to be the last word because we couldn't top it. So thank you so much, Kshama. I've loved talking to you. God bless you.